Snow falls on an old apartment. Inside, the holiday season is in swing. On the first floor, Cokes are poured and stories shared among friends. 3 flights up, one generation passes down the family recipe to the next.
So good.
Inside every home, there's magic. Coca-Cola, real magic.
Enjoy the real magic of the season with close friends, family, and refreshing Coca-Cola paired with all your holiday meals.
When it comes to the holidays, it's not just a turkey and mistletoe that makes the season bright. It's you, making something special in the kitchen with new cookware and small appliances, setting the table with stylish dishware, glassware, and accent pieces, and serving it up with beautiful trays, bowls, and cheese boards. HomeDepot.com has all the cookware and tableware you need to make your holiday meal memorable for you and the kids. Whether they're 1 or 92, make the holidays yours with home decor from the Home Depot. How doers get more done.
Hey guys, it's Allie. Welcome back to Infertile AF, the podcast. This is episode 144 called Stephanie L. Today's episode is presented by Belly. Belly offers modern prenatal vitamins optimized for fertility, prenatal, and post-pregnancy health. To learn more about how to optimize your fertility and pregnancy health, check out their vegan-friendly, dairy-free, non-GMO vitamins for both men and women at bellybaby.com. That's spelled BELIBABY.com. The best part, if you use code ALLIE15, you'll get 15% off your first month of either Belly Women or Belly Men. Again, that's code ALLIE15, ALI15, for 15% off. Thanks, Belly. Okay, guys, so where do I even begin with my friend Stephanie, who I met through Instagram? She has been through a lot. 10 transfers in her IVF treatment. And spoiler alert, she is actually currently pregnant and going to give birth very soon. I'm not going to tell you which number baby she's going to give birth to, but I want you guys to hear it all for yourself. I will say that she is incredible, and like so many of my guests, she wants to share her story to make you guys feel less alone. She's been through so much, and without further ado, this is Stephanie's infertility story. All right, Stephanie, I'm so glad to talk to you. We have been DMing and chatting on Instagram, I feel like, for 2 years.
Yes, I think it has been 2 years. So
I feel like I know you, but we just officially met. So thank you for doing this. And let's start at the beginning with you. Did you always want to have kids?
I did. I was never that person that really, picked out the kid names and planned I want to have, one of this and one of that. But I knew I wanted to be a mom, some capacity.
Okay. So flashing forward, what happened when you started to try?
Yeah. So I met my husband my 4th year of medical school, and I'm a little bit of a cougar. I'm 9 years older than he is. And
yes.
I remember when we met, he said, "Oh, this wouldn't work out. You're going to want marriage and babies. And I want to be a surgeon," and which is ironic because he did not end up being a surgeon. Neither one of us are, but we're both emergency physicians. But then he came back 6 months later and said, "You know what? You're right. We're meant to be together. Let's do this." And, as far as being a little bit older, whatever happens, we'll, take it one step at a time.
Yeah. How old were you when you guys got married?
I was 35.
Okay. So how long before you started talking about babies and starting to expand your family?
We wanted to get through our intern year of training. I had never been pregnant before, and I didn't want to, when you're a new doctor, you're judged pretty, under the microscope. And I didn't want to be nauseated and have someone think, "Oh, well, she's just nervous," or it just felt like taking on a lot. So we decided we weren't going to try it all really that first year or even that into the second year of our marriage. But after that, we started trying in, I guess it was 2015.
Okay.
And, in some respects, being both in training at the time was very difficult because sometimes we'd both be on opposite schedules. So one of us would be working overnight and the other would be working during the day. And, I'm not an REI, but I'm pretty sure you need to be in the same room for some of this.
Right. You're like, when are we going to knock boots so that we can actually try to
So that was probably part of our trouble, was just coordinating and actually being able to try. But I think with my age, I went to a regular OB-GYN visit, and my OB kind of said, "Hey, are you thinking about this? You're already over 35." And I knew I was already, quote, AMA, advanced maternal age. Mm-hmm. We have a doctor in the group. If you want to just, talk about it, I'm, happy to set up the appointment. And so I said, what's the harm? And so we had that appointment, and that's kind of how we got started on, even before, we didn't wait the whole 1 year thing. That's right. Not necessary, as I think a lot of people find out sometimes on the later end. But
yes, I've been talking about that a lot lately, where it's just like, you don't need to wait the year. The year is just like arbitrary.
So we got connected to an REI that actually is part of the hospital that we both worked at the time. And, we started with the meds and did all the initial testing, the sperm analysis, the HSG to make sure your tubes are open, the hormone testing, all that stuff. And basically everything looked good. We were labeled the favorite unexplained infertility. So
yes. Isn't that a great term?
Yeah. You really want, so it's nice to know nothing's wrong specifically, but then you don't have anything to fix or, a specific solution to try. You're just kind of shooting in the dark, no pun intended.
What did they tell you to do, or what were you thinking at the time?
Well, we had options to, I guess when you try like the Clomid and the Femara, there's evidence that after you try it for so many months, if it hasn't worked, the effectiveness is really not going to be there. And our doctor was very evidence-based and straightforward about, look, we've kind of reached that max. And he asked a very important question at the time that I thought was kind of insane, because I was just focused on trying to have one baby. But he said, what do you want your family to look like? Do you want multiple kids? Do you just want one kid? What does that look like for you guys? And we hadn't really talked about that. I think when you're trying so hard just to have one, it feels silly to even think about a gaggle of kids or something. It was a very foreign idea to me that neither one of us had really talked about. We'd sort of almost given up on that idea.
Right, exactly.
But what our doctor said that really, I think, totally flipped how we were looking at IVF. We'd sort of were looking at IVF like, oh, this is a last ditch. This is, kind of failure of everything else. And now we're here. And instead of looking at it like that, he said, well, if you want more than one kid, and my husband's one of 4 boys and I have an older sister, so we did ideally want more than one. If you want more than one, then it makes sense not to wait and keep trying, but to go ahead and do the IVF now, because any eggs and embryos that we're able to make now are going to be there when you're trying for number 2 or number 3 or what have you. And if you do, even if you were lucky to get pregnant on Clomid or Femara now, then you still might, when you're trying for number 2, have the same difficulty and then be that much older and trying IVF.
Yes, makes perfect sense. But at the time, you're like, wow, I never even thought about that before.
Yeah, absolutely. And so to me, it really flipped IVF from like this, like I said, kind of not a failure, but just sort of a last resort because nothing else had worked, to being able to kind of take the wheel and take control of our journey. At least that's how I felt at the time. And it really kind of made me a lot more optimistic and positive about the experience than I had been.
Yeah, because it's like, okay, now you've got opportunities, maybe it makes you feel hopeful for down the road.
Yeah. And at the time, fortunately, our insurance, I think, paid up to $5,000 towards infertility testing. And so we had a little bit of coverage, but really, I think it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks that we made the decision and had to come up with the finances, because really the bulk we were going to pay out of pocket to go ahead and do that first retrieval.
Right. Yeah. And as many listeners know, it's like $5,000 sounds great. But then once you get into it and you see the actual sheet of like what everything costs, you're like, oh, that's like a drop in the bucket. Cool.
Yeah. At the time, because this was 2016, I was happy. It was rare to have any money that would go towards infertility at all. So
that's true. I didn't have any. What happened when you guys started down that IVF road, and how many rounds did you end up doing and all that?
Yeah. So that first retrieval was pretty successful. I think they got, 17. I forget, how fast the drop off was, but we ended up sending 10 5-day blasts. Well, we did one fresh transfer, and then we sent 9 to the freezer, which now I know was great. I think being new to the process at the time, I didn't know what to make of that number, but now I know that was really,
that's a lot.
A good result. So we were happy with that. And at the time, genetic testing wasn't recommended. I hadn't had any losses. I was 35, maybe 36 by this point. So we just did the fresh transfer, and it worked. On the first try, which was not my expectation. I think I'd set myself up for, for it to take 2 or maybe 3 transfers, but
which is often the case. I'm like you in that it did work on the first try. And now I know in retrospect how fucking lucky that was. Like, so many of my friends and, people in this community are 6, 7, 8 rounds. It takes so long and it's so frustrating and devastating. So what was it like when you got the call that you were pregnant?
Well, I cheated a little. I did test at home, but I'd had a trigger and I didn't know enough about, I was being a silly medical person. I was, on my pharmacology references trying to figure out what that metabolic half-life was for the HCG trigger and, when that should fall out of my system and all this stuff. And I think I might have even, I'm such a geek, graphed in Excel as a chart.
I love it. I love a good Excel spreadsheet chart. Whatnot.
No, but and I ended up I was like, oh, my clinic's going to think I'm insane. A lot of people test at home, but I sent my favorite nurse a message, and I was like, I have this, but I don't know if I can, think it's real or not. And she sent me sort of a very hopeful message that was like, oh, that's a good line. That would be pretty surprising to be still the trigger in your system. And our betas all came back, doubling appropriately. And
wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay. So your first baby was born, 2016?
February of 2017, which was actually 2 months early.
Okay.
I was in my 3rd year of emergency medicine training and working maybe 80 hours a week, flipping from day shift to night shift. And I ended up developing severe preeclampsia and HELP syndrome. And so I just remember feeling like every day I was waking up, I was running a marathon, and I could tell that every day, I was just dragging more and more. And I was getting farther and farther away from the finish line. I had headaches, and my legs looked like tree trunks. And ultimately, I was at work, and one of the other doctors, female physician, said, you should check your urine for protein, because my blood pressures were up. But I thought, I have a stressful job. I just had to intubate and put somebody on a ventilator that was in this terrible car accident. Of course, my heart rate and my blood pressure are up. I have a headache. I'm dehydrated. I'm always, you never take care of yourself when you're at work. But she said,
right.
Check your urine, and it had the hallmark protein. And so at like 3:30 in the morning, I checked myself in to L&D at my own hospital, and basically had our daughter 2 days later after an emergent induction. So she came at 32 weeks and 3 days.
Okay.
Which was really scary and not the best birth experience, but we were happy to be in the hospital with people that we work with and we knew and we trusted, and we knew what they were doing. And we were happy. Our hospital is like the big academic center that has the NICU. One of the things I think is horrific is if you have to go through that and then you get separated. Mom's at one hospital and baby ends up at a NICU at a different hospital.
I just want to commend the NICU, doctors and nurses and everybody involved in the NICU. There's so many amazing people doing those jobs. And also the medical professionals like you that are going through, infertility or assisted reproductive technology while they're working in the medical field. There's so many of you guys, and it's just you're doing, thankless work and amazing work, but also going through this at the same time. So just shout out.
It really is hard, like diagnosing people in the ER. A lot of people come in for abdominal pain or, vaginal bleeding, and I'm diagnosing them as pregnant. And to some of them, that's welcome news. To others, it's not welcome news. And, and that we're all human beings. That can be particularly painful when you want something so badly, and it seems to happen so easily or accidentally for other people. And so I appreciate you.
Yeah, such a good point. Well, I'm glad that, your daughter went through the NICU. And how long was she there?
She was there 34 days, basically just what they call feeding and growing. She did have a complication when it turned out she had actually had a small stroke when she was in the NICU that we didn't know about at the time because you couldn't necessarily tell from looking at her or anything. But she, at 4 months, her pediatrician caught that her head circumference had gotten very big and sent us for an ultrasound and essentially diagnosed hydrocephalus. And so at 4 months old, she had brain surgery to put in a shunt, which is a tube that drains the excess fluid from the brain down to the abdomen. And she still has that today. She'll have that for life. And so I think I harbor, with working so hard and working so many hours, I know this is, the rational part of me knows that, I didn't do this, I'm not responsible, but, I always wonder, would she have to deal with this lifetime health issue if, I hadn't had to work so much, or if the hours were a little less demanding or whatnot. So I did, in my subsequent pregnancies did make a conscious decision that I was going to, advocate for myself and it's so important forward, fight for reasonable hours in third trimester and maternity leave starting when it should and things like that.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I do think, we as women are really hard on ourselves and, you don't ever really know, right, what affects one thing or if something could have been different if you hadn't been working so hard. Okay, so we know that this is not the end of your story. What happened when you started trying for number 2?
Well, we actually ended up with a surprise spontaneous pregnancy as our next step in the journey.
Okay.
In March 2018, when our daughter was just over a year old, I'm usually pretty regular, but I was maybe 2 days late, took a test, and what in the world, right? You go through IVF and then all of a sudden, boom. And I remember my REI at the time saying, sometimes you just have to, quote, dust out the cobwebs, which I remember being somewhat insulted by at the time, thinking, that was a knock on my age and stuff. But I think he might have been right. Like, it's almost like once your body figures out a little bit what to do, or who knows, maybe it's all freaking random crapshoot. I don't know.
Who knows? Exactly. Who knows?
But that's what happened. And so we were just like over the moon, and a little bit overwhelmed, to be honest, because that spacing was maybe less than ideal, but just sort of happy to have the gift, if you will. But unfortunately we did, at this point, I was like, 40. We did the non-invasive prenatal testing, which unfortunately showed a high risk for trisomy 21, which is Down syndrome. Mm-hmm. And then we followed that up. It was devastating. We followed that up with a CVS right around 11 weeks, because that was the test we could do sooner rather than an amnio. And unfortunately, that also confirmed the diagnosis of trisomy 21. And at the time, it's funny, you can only make decisions off the information you have at the time in your life, or whatever you're going through, right? And so at the time, our daughter, like I said, was just over a year old, but she had this brain issue. She wasn't walking, she wasn't talking. We didn't know if those things would ever happen we didn't know if she was going to be wheelchair bound. There were a lot of big unknowns and question marks as far as her health. And then I had gotten so sick with her pregnancy, and the idea that this pregnancy, even if it survived to term, might require, congenital heart surgeries. And, her going through brain surgery was, I can't even tell you, one of the definitely top 3 most stressful things in my life. And, we barely knew if we could keep it together to take care of one special needs child, nevertheless, too. And so we made, and then my health, like what happens if, I get super sick in pregnancy again for what might not even be a viable pregnancy. It just felt like such a risk.
It's such a hard decision. And thank you for sharing all of this with us. So what were the conversations like between you and your husband at this point? And your doctors?
I think we were all on the same page in terms of those concerns. I also had, I don't know, maybe they're selfish, but I thought, I don't want to stay home. I fought. I went, for the training. I like being a doctor. I wanted to be able to keep my career, but, there were a lot of things that just, whether financially or just in terms of our family and feeling fulfillment, I felt very uncertain if we continued that pregnancy. So my husband was very supportive. He was sort of, whatever. He didn't put it all on me to make the decision, but, I know 100% that no matter what I picked, he would have been supportive in that. But he did, we made the decision together. And also I had a very good genetics nurse that helped give me realistic and accurate information about the true risk of, will this pregnancy even go to term? And, what's the risk of heart defects and a lot of the other complications that can come with those genetic abnormalities.
Right.
So I felt like we were making an informed decision that at the time was the best for our family. It turns out our daughter is, perfectly what you would call neurotypical. You'd never know that she's got a tube in her brain that goes all the way to her belly.
Wow.
And that she was early and but we didn't know that at the time.
Sure. So you have to make this decision, terminating for medical reasons, right?
Yep.
TFMR. It's tough. It's really tough.
Yeah. And it felt like such a fucking slap in the face. It's like, why in the world did we get this gift of this spontaneous pregnancy only to have it yanked away like that?
Right.
It just,
I'm so sorry.
Like what was the point? It just felt like, really? Do we need to go through more after everything we've just been through in the last year or two?
Exactly.
And I was mad at the world, to be honest.
Yes, I would have been too. Fuck.
Yeah. So that was
what's
difficult.
The process? I mean, you don't have to get into the details of the termination, but the grieving process and the aftermath, and how did you get through that? Because you've got a little one at home, and she's going through some stuff too.
Yeah, I was one of those people. I wanted to get past it and get on to trying again. It's funny because we weren't even trying when we got pregnant, but then once we were pregnant and kind of had that vision, or had adjusted to the idea, it was all I could think about to heal, and it, like people say, it's not a replacement, but you just, I don't know. That's what felt right for me, was to try again to build our family. I ended up having a D&E, but unfortunately there was, my HCG would not go down. And I advocated for a ultrasound, and it turned out there was some retained tissue that I think we tried 2 rounds of methotrexate to use medicine to help try to clear that up so that my HCG would go down. And eventually, I think it was 12, maybe 16 weeks later. So it was an entire summer, really, that I was sort of being reminded that sort of this pregnancy was lingering. Or
so, how far along were you when you did the termination? How many weeks?
12 weeks, 6 days. Yeah,
rough. I'm so sorry.
So, yeah, and unfortunately, Virginia has some laws forced language they have to tell you when you're trying to make a decision, which, is, in my opinion, inappropriate and not medically necessary and excessively painful, particularly when it's a desired pregnancy, to be forced to get ultrasound. I just had 2 ultrasounds in the last 24 hours, but you have to, at the facility that day, you have to have another ultrasound. The folks were kind enough to, not make me look at it or, turn the screen or whatever, so there's a lot of things that play into it, depending on your state, which are just like, again, add insult to injury, like you said before.
Yes. Oh, can we fix that? Come on, people.
I know. I have a lot of friends from medical school and that are OB-GYN and really trying to advocate and fix some of those things, because every woman's story, and reason for the path that they're taking is different. And I can tell you, having been on the patient side and have been on the physician side too, like nobody is in a position to judge what's right for, one woman or her family. It's just.
Yeah. I remember talking to somebody who was telling me that they had to terminate for medical reasons. And, they were just, the people were very insensitive. It's like, so you're getting an abortion, and it was like, no, that's not, let's not spin it that way. Let's not frame it that way. Let's not break my heart even more,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it technically it's the same procedure, and so medically, I think it's important we do recognize it as that and use that word. I personally have a hard time, just because of, I'm not particularly religious. I think that's what I told you. I originally attracted me to your podcast was I had found a lot online that were very religious, and I didn't necessarily connect to. F-bombs I can connect to.
Fuck yeah. Yes, we connected over that for sure.
Yeah. But technically
right.
It was an abortion. For, one of the million different reasons that women choose to go that route. So. Right.
Exactly. I don't know. There's something about abortion or termination just seems like a more humane term to me personally. My opinion.
Yeah. Language, the language matters a lot. And I, some days I struggle with that. Like it shouldn't, or it should, or, how do we talk about these things and be fair? But yeah. So needless to say, that I left that scenario super motivated to try again. But unfortunately, unlike our, first transfer that worked on the first try, we found ourselves in the boat that I think a lot of other people are, where, you really have a lot of failure before you have any success.
Right.
So I guess it was like August 2018. Fortunately, we had a bunch in the freezer. We hadn't yet tested them because.
So you still had the 9 on ice, right?
Yeah, we had 9 on ice, but they weren't genetically tested. And now, having been through what we just went through, a loss for genetic issues, I was hell-bent to do whatever I could to avoid going through a similar situation, because it was just such a terrible experience.
So did you get them tested?
Yeah, we talked about it with our doctor and ended up, I should say too, in the meantime, a couple things happened. So the hospital we work for built an entire embryology lab and hired embryologists. And our doctor, who had been basically doing procedures at a competitor, but moved over and had his own practice entirely. And so we transferred our embryos from the other place in town. And it turned out, because the hospital owned the place, we now had 100% coverage through insurance for IVF.
That's incredible. Okay.
Which was amazing. So those were the bright sides going into trying again.
Right. Okay.
And so I have a picture of me with the cooler that they give you, that they make you sign your life away, and you basically take the cooler over to the other place and they load up your embryos and you sign a bunch of stuff. And then I had it strapped into my front seat, with the seatbelt on and everything, just like they were
precious cargo.
Precious cargo. And, a lot of hope in my face.
Yes.
That some of those 9 were, and the 9 turned into 6 after testing.
Okay.
6 of the 9 were genetically normal.
Almost 90% of women have cellulite. And guess what? It's not their fault. We don't choose cellulite, but we can choose a different way to treat it. Meet Quo, collagenase Clostridium histolyticum, AAES, the first and only FDA-approved prescription injectable for moderate to severe cellulite in the buttocks of adult women. This non-surgical treatment is injected by an aesthetic specialist in 10 minutes or less. Individual results may vary. Do not receive if you are allergic to any collagenase or ingredients in Quo, or have an infection at the treatment site. May cause serious side effects, allergic reactions including anaphylaxis, and injection site bruising. Seek medical help right away for any signs of allergic hypersensitivity. Tell your doctor about all your medical conditions if you have a bleeding condition or take medicine that prevents clotting. Most common side effects include bruising, pain, hardness, itching, redness, discoloration, swelling, and warmth at the injection site. Ask your doctor about all possible side effects and for product information. If you're ready to get to the bottom of your cellulite, learn more and find a specialist at quo.com.
Wow, that's still a high number.
Yeah.
So then what happened?
So we started pretty much right away, right? These were all going to be frozen transferred. We decided to try unmedicated just because why not? And we transferred one normal, it failed. Next month, did another unmedicated, transferred. And, we sort of thought, well, we got success on the first try last time. We're due for a couple failures.
Right.
So transfer 2, unmedicated, it was a normal one, failed. Transfer 3, tried a medicated cycle just to, do something different. It used one of the normal embryos, failed. Transfer 4. And these were all back to back. This is like all through the fall of 2018.
Yeah.
So 4, we did another medicated cycle, but adjusted the meds a little bit, nothing crazy. And that failed. And so then we sort of, I was over it. It was like Christmas time. I was like, you know what, let's regroup after the new year. And we decided that in January, we were going to try a hysteroscopy where they actually go and look with the camera and look for, because, I'd had that D&E. Was there a complication or scar there? Like, are we missing something? But really
they're checking like the health of your uterus and the viability like an implantation.
Right. Because it seems like something has changed, right? Because before I had a very hospitable uterus, if you will. And then all of a sudden now we've had, all these failures of transfers. So, and at this point we opted to go ahead and do another retrieval because we knew we only had 2 left. And again, just sort of thinking, we're not having success here. We're not getting any younger. Let's do another retrieval and try to bank some things. So we did our second retrieval in February 2019 and got 3 5-day blasts. And unfortunately, 2 of those were abnormal and 1 was a mosaic. So we basically did our 5th transfer. We transferred the 2 normals we still had, and that failed. And
oh my God.
So that was like all of our 6 normal embryos from that first retrieval were gone.
Yeah.
Now. The ones in the cooler in the front seat were gone.
Oh, I'm so sorry. And are you just like emotionally, how are you doing? Because you're putting your body through a lot physically. You're putting your marriage through a lot. Your relationship with your daughter, not that would have, suffered, but like, it's hard, you're raising a child at the same time. Like you've got a lot going on. Yeah.
I think that's about when, I was like, am I insane? Am I chasing something am I just silly now? Am I the lady showing up to the clinic and all the people just don't want to tell me that like, maybe I should give up, cause I felt like we were trying the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And,
the definition of insanity,
like, and I
not
just,
that you know what I mean. There's that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that's when I was just so frustrated. And so, but then at the same time, I would oscillate back and say, but you know what, we're lucky. We have insurance coverage. We're in a position to keep doing this for an extended time that a lot of people would kill to be in that, have, a financial coverage like that. We need to just keep going, just kind of same thing I did to get through medical school is just sort of put your head down and take it day by day. And one day you look up and you have, hopefully or achieve what you've been working hard for,
Right.
Because otherwise it just feels like a grind. So to sort of speed it up, we did a third retrieval in March of 2019. Again, just kind of thinking, well, we have this coverage, we might as well do it. I do well with the meds. They don't turn me into some raging crazy person.
Mm-hmm.
Gain a little bit of weight with it, but for the most part feel like my normal self. And so I felt like physically I was definitely fine. Emotionally I was struggling, but physically and financially we were prepared to do it. And I gave my husband like a pass because scheduling wise, with both of us, being physicians and working at the same place, it was difficult. We basically had him freeze a whole bunch of sample, and I was kind of doing all of this on my own, which was okay because it just sort of seemed like if it's just going to keep failing and it's going to be quote wasted time, it should only be wasting the time of one of us,
Yeah.
So
that makes sense.
So that's kind of, we were both on board with that. So we did our third retrieval. We got 4 or 5 day blasts. 1 was normal and 3 were abnormal. And so it was amazing to me, like in just 2 years from age 38 to 40.
Yeah.
Like I had gotten, 6, 7 normals. And then now I'm down to none or 1 in each retrieval.
Absolutely. It's crazy.
So we started, fortunately, my doctor's pretty progressive and is willing to transfer both mosaics and abnormals. I know not all REIs will do that. He was always willing to transfer things that would not result in a live birth. So like he would never transfer like a, trisomy 18 or trisomy 21, but things that never had a reported live birth of that particular defect, we sort of assumed, well, if it's a, true positive, it's not compatible. In the worst case, it would end in a miscarriage. I said I was willing to accept that. I say, having never had a miscarriage myself before, and if it was a false positive, meaning the embryo was actually normal, then maybe we'd end up with a healthy pregnancy. And there are many, many cases now. At the time, this was sort of a novel idea, but there are many, many cases now of healthy pregnancies with mosaic and abnormal embryos. So there are a lot of doctors that will transfer them depending on what those particular abnormalities are.
Yes. There's a really great article in New York Magazine that came out a couple of years ago all about mosaic embryos. And it's just fascinating.
Yeah. So, and I think it's important, when you're trying to decide whether to test or not, we would have given up on testing or started, stopped testing if my doctor wasn't willing to transfer them, because otherwise we would have just been empty-handed with nothing to transfer.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it was still important to me to try to avoid another, genetic defect because that was so difficult. But at the same time, like I'd reached a point where I was like, you know what, I'm almost willing to face that again because the alternative is not having another child.
Yeah.
You just sort of weigh.
Yeah. You weigh your option. The bar is constantly shifting, right? It's
yes.
You never thought you would have considered X, Y, and Z until you got to a certain point. And then it's like, oh, well, maybe we should do this. It's so interesting.
Yeah. And my husband was always good about that. We sort of would check in, it's exhausting if you're trying to check in like every week, but every month or 2 months, 3 months, we just sort of make sure we were still on the same page in terms of what we could tolerate physically, financially, emotionally in our marriage. And I think that was important, because it changes. It definitely changes. It's all situational.
Definitely.
So we stopped testing just because we were only getting abnormals and mosaics and we were transferring them all anyway. So that was the one part that our insurance might not have covered if I recall. And so it was kind of like,
Right.
And the other thing was our daughter, our very first success was a fresh transfer. And that was the only thing we hadn't tried yet. These had all been frozen transfers. And I thought, well, maybe my body just wants a fresh transfer again. And I knew that I was not going to be able to call it quits until we kind of tried all the reasonable things. And so that was the other reason on Retrieval 4, we ended up not testing. And we got 2 day 5 blasts and 3 day 6 blasts. And so we ended up right after that doing transfer, transfer 9 at this point. We transferred 2 of the non-tested embryos that looked the best, and that failed.
Oh my gosh.
So
you're such a badass for going through all this, though.
It was exhausting.
Were there people in your life who were just like, what are you doing? Like, did anyone question you or
I think my parents sort of, I probably told them half of what was going on.
Right.
At some point the conversations, early on I was sharing with friends, like kind of updates, like, oh, we did a transfer. But then when they keep failing, having that conversation over and over again is just exhausting and awkward for everyone. And so when I needed to talk, I would reach out. But yeah, I think some folks worried, that I was putting too much on myself physically and, and emotionally too. So, but and this was about the time I started thinking like, all right, is this the end of our journey? Like how do I come to peace, and make peace with this if we're going to be a family of 3, like what else do I need to do either in this process or talking to my doctor or is there another test or, and I looked a little bit about immunology. Because I do have 2 autoimmune skin conditions. I have vitiligo, which is like the white patches you see on people's skin, and then I have psoriasis. And I actually set up an appointment with one of the leading doctors in that space, and unfortunately, he literally died 2 weeks before my appointment. I mean, it was horrific, right? I'm like, oh, what a loss to the infertility world. That was kind of the doctor side of me, because this is the guy was like a pioneer. And then personally, I was just like, are you kidding me? Like another kick me while I'm down. Like this was my hope. This was the thing I was hanging on to be able to close the door or whatever. And so what I ended up doing was where we went to medical school, they actually have what's called the Jones Institute, and they made the first IVF baby in the United States. And so they're a very strong, that's not where we live currently. It's about 2 hours away. And my husband and I decided that, you know what, we're going there for a second opinion. I had ironically, as a 4th-year medical student, done a rotation in REI, not knowing at the time that I was going to be on the other side of things. And had rotated with one of the female physicians there who I just left with a very positive impression. And so I basically went back to her and said, look, here's what we've been through. We're, I think, near the end of the road. What do you think? And the first thing she said is, well, when did you do your ERA? I don't see that on your timeline. And I said, we never did one because, and my doctor's correct, there's not really a body of evidence that that an ERA test for receptivity will increase live birth rates. And so my current doctor, not the second opinion doctor, I always appreciated, like, he was very conscientious of the fact that, people's time and money and health is sacred, and to, be very deliberate about what he recommended or didn't. So he had always steered us away from that. And I honestly followed him because I was checking the evidence behind him and knew that he was right. There wasn't really a lot that said that ERA is helpful. But at this point, like I said, I was near the end of the road. I was desperate to try or check whatever those last boxes were so that I could make peace. And, if we were going to close the book on all this. And so I went back to my doctor because it was all in network and covered. And I said, would you be willing to do this? And he said, sure, with the understanding that, here's the risks, here's the benefits, and there's not a lot of evidence, but sure. And so we did that. That was September 2019. And it said I was 12 hours early receptive, which meant I needed somehow between my first pregnancy with my daughter that was successful, and now 2.5 years later, my window had changed,
Yeah.
I guess, or shifted.
Right.
So I
So
needed
they-
12 more hours of progesterone.
Progesterone. Right. Okay. That's what I was going to say is they give you progesterone.
Yep.
Yep.
So we did that. And lo and behold, for transfer 10, we put in 3 untested blasts. I think they were all day 6. And Oliver was born in June of 2020.
Oh my gosh. Oliver.
At 38
Transfer
weeks.
10, Stephanie.
I know, transfer 10.
10.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and he came at 38 weeks. I did get induced. I was starting to get ICP, which intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy. I honestly felt, it's like you get a buildup. It's another liver issue, kind of like HELLP syndrome, but you get a buildup of bile acids. And I was getting just a little bit itchy. Like some women have this and they are miserable, and they're like scratching their skin off and very uncomfortable. I was lucky. I really was not even all that symptomatic, but he was also really big because my husband's 6'5" and we seem to make very large babies.
Wow.
And so
how tall are you?
I'm 5'6".
Okay.
And I have a sister that's 5'10". So we're kind of big and tall people, and we have big heads too. So they saw he was getting big and saw these bile acid levels creeping up, and they said, you know what, at 37 weeks, everything's cooked. Well, let's do an induction. And so he came at 38. And everybody went home together. I was mentally present. I wasn't in the magnesium fog of my first delivery.
Yeah.
And it was really nice. It was a really healing to have a non-traumatic birth experience, especially after what we've been through with the loss and
right
with our daughter. It was just really, really exactly what I needed.
Yes. Wonderful.
Yeah. So that was good. Now, when we went home, what we didn't realize is when we brought our daughter home, she came home on a schedule like clockwork because she had the best NICU nurses that had her feeding and sleeping on this perfect schedule. And we got Oliver home and realized we've never done this before. We didn't have to do this. Our daughter came home trained.
Right.
And so he didn't sleep for 7 or 8 months. And, we kind of had it was almost like we were new parents because we had to, be a lot more deliberate about some schedules and routines and things like that. But it was nice.
Right.
It was really nice just to have such a smoother time in transition.
That makes sense. So that's still not the end of your story, right?
Yeah. So I assumed, your OB always asks you afterwards, like, oh, do you want an IUD or whatever? And I was convinced in my head I was going to talk my husband into a vasectomy. And of course I thought, well, we're IVF, it's not going to happen naturally. And I think it was April of this year. Okay. I went and got 2021. I went and I got my regular mammogram. I was a little bit off schedule, because I'd been breastfeeding. And so they want you, I think it's 6 months after you finish before you do that. And I go and I get my mammogram because at this point I'm 42. And wouldn't you know, it shows a mass in my left breast. And I was like, oh gosh, that was a curveball. We don't have any cancer in our family, any breast cancer. And I was like, oh gosh. So, and they wanted me to come in for follow-up imaging. And so the day after Easter, so that Monday after Easter, I was supposed to go back. And Sunday night, I took a test. This is probably the doctor in me because I get annoyed when people are, when you go for any kind of x-ray or CAT scan, they always ask you if you're pregnant.
Right. Is there any chance that you could be pregnant?
Yeah. Is there any chance? And I'm like, well, technically, I think my husband and I at TMI had sex one time in the last month, and it was not at the ovulation window, but I guess technically
right.
I'm not on any birth control, and so I should take a test. So I'm washing my kids in the bathtub, and I pee on a stick, one of the cheapies, and turn around and don't even pay attention to it until my little timer goes off, and sure shit, there's a second line.
Holy shit.
And at first I was kind of like, oh gosh, I was like, my husband, I don't know how he's going to react to this because, we hadn't really talked about it, hadn't really planned for it. I figured, well, maybe he'd like the tax break, but this means we, don't fit in our house anymore. We don't fit in our cars anymore.
Oh my gosh.
It's a it's a big deal.
Right.
And so it ended up there that Sunday night, the night of Easter, was difficult because there was basically like 16 hours where I was potentially had breast cancer and was pregnant. And I just kept thinking with my story, like, wouldn't that be the case, right? Here's like a blessing. Here's this gift, but oh, by the way, it's tainted by the fact that you have cancer or something. But fortunately, when I went, my appointment was like first thing Monday morning, and it was the actual doctor that was doing the ultrasound, and I read ultrasound too. So as soon as like they started the test, they were able to say that it was just a simple cyst and not anything cancerous. But like, I did not sleep that night before.
But also, are you nervous about the pregnancy? Like, is this going to be viable? What's going to happen?
Because my only other spontaneous pregnancy ended horrifically. And so there's, as terrible as the IVF process is, there's a reassurance, there's checkups, there's, a little bit of transparency to the process that, for me, I'd learned, that had been my experience. I'd learned to find comfort in that, for better or worse. And this felt very just chaotic and, like, what is this going to be a repeat of what happened before? Was really one of my big fears.
Of course. So when were you able to get in and see, have an ultrasound and hear the heartbeat and all that?
Yes. So my REI was awesome. He was willing to get me in, even though, he didn't have anything to do with this one, was willing to see me. And so had me come in at what we thought would have been 6 weeks, but I was measuring only 5 weeks. And so it took a couple, maybe 2 or 3 ultrasounds to really make sure the betas were doubling appropriately. He was kind enough to check betas too, which doesn't always happen with spontaneous pregnancy, but the ultrasounds were tracking like a week behind. And so we really weren't sure if it was going to be viable, because based on that one time that we'd had sex and when in theory I should have ovulated, and I'm usually pretty regular, like I must have like ovulated a week late and the sperm stuck around for a record like 6, 7, 8 days.
Oh my God.
I mean, the scientific understanding of how long sperm can stick around and still fertilize is more like along the lines of 3 to 5 days max. And so I'll always wonder about that math. But basically we ended up that it was just, I was a week behind where we thought we were. And then in June, right when actually at Oliver's first birthday party, we surprised our family and told them we were pregnant again. And we actually had just gotten our NIPT results that were normal. We really were kind of waiting to tell anybody until we got past that hurdle.
Yeah.
And once we did, we also found out the gender. And what we did is our genetic nurse leaves a voicemail saying what the gender is. And so we surprised everyone and we Zoomed because of COVID with a bunch of friends and family that were overseas and across the country. And not only did we tell them we were pregnant, surprise, but we also ourselves listened to that voicemail and learned the gender with everybody.
Oh my gosh.
Too, what's the
gender?
So this one's a girl. So I am due as of today. Let's see, what am I? 35 weeks and change. Due December 17th. So,
wow.
So far, this has been a normal, healthy pregnancy. Actually, I'd say my easiest one so far. I've got no swelling. We even, I mentioned to you earlier, we even just moved into a new house. We had to get some square footage now that we're going to be a family of 5, which looking back is crazy because I still distinctly recall sitting down and making peace and mapping out that family of 3, when we are having so much trouble trying for number 2. To be in this position is amazing. I'll be honest, sometimes there's mixed emotions. Like I feel as a physician, I feel like I should be able to trust the science and this stuff should play out. You take the medicine, you follow the steps, and then, but sometimes it's just a freaking black box, in a crapshoot in Vegas,
Totally. It's like miracles do happen. And sometimes the science doesn't play out how you think it's going to. And it's just, you never fucking know. It's so, life is wild.
And I just feel, I could so easily have none, or just Evie, our daughter, like a different roll of the dice. And I could still be, on Facebook trying to talk to people and research things and, doing what, I try to stay online and be present and, having been through kind of a little bit of everything with this, be a resource for other people, because I always found that was, one of the best outlets just kind of for information and emotionally and for advocating for myself, was to talk to other people that had been through.
Yeah, 100%.
Been through it. So I try to, now that I'm kind of on the other side of these things, try to serve in that same role for other people where I can.
Yes, you definitely do. That's how we connected, basically. It was through Instagram. So thank you for everything that you've done for the community. What a fucking story. I'm so glad that you're feeling good and the baby's healthy. Wow.
So I'm 43 and my REI, when I went back, he was like, Stephanie, you're supposed to get worse at this as you get older, not better. I said, well, there you go. I'll take it.
All right, everybody. As always, thank you so much for listening. And Stephanie, oh my gosh, you're going to have your baby any day now. So if you guys want to follow her, go over to my Instagram at Infertile AF Stories, and I will tag her, and then you can go to her account and see what happens with her babe, who is going to be here any moment. Thank you so much for listening, like I said. And if you guys are looking for more support, as always, check out Fertility Rally. We're a community. We've got content. And we've got curated events. We are there for you no matter what you're going through. So check it out on Instagram at Fertility Rally, or you can go to our site, fertilityrally.com. We have so many members from all over the world going through so many different things. So there's definitely somebody, at least, a handful of people you can connect with, if not more. But we're always looking to grow our community and reach out. So please spread the word. Thanks again for your support, and I will talk to you guys next time.
Not since flying reindeer have the holidays seen something so amazing. Just in time to make selfie-ready holiday hair easy. Introducing the do-it-all styling tools for glam holiday hair. The holidays are happier with glam hair. And the Knot Doctor all-in-one dryer brushes from Conair makes it easy. Detangle, dry, and style in one step. No elf needed. The Knot Doctor collection has a dryer brush for every hair type and style. The pink smoothing paddle dryer brush has Flexolite bristles for painless detangling and high-performance power for quick styling and smooth, shiny results. And the purple dryer brush comes with a bonus volumizing attachment to boost lift and volume at the roots. It's perfect for salon blowouts at home. And since they're ideal for every hair type and length, they make great gifts for everyone on your list who wants beautiful hair without the hassles. Shop the Knot Doctor dryer brushes at Conair.com or at your favorite retailers now.